And I commend them for that because they fully understand the power that their words will have. And I'm not saying that they need to, that all celebrities need to be silent, because they're humans just like you and I, and especially the ones that are Americans. I mean, they're American just like you and I. They have a right to express themselves, and look, I have a right to agree with them or disagree with them. They should not have a bigger say simply because, they have a hit song, or they have a hit movie, or they have a hit TV show, or they write a hit book or something. It doesn't give them special elevation, or it shouldn't. I had two things about that today, about people with special elevation. Well, there are folks that are very quiet and silent. And there, in fact, there are celebrities that kind of disappear on us, yet they're still alive. Janet Jackson, for one. Now, I'm a huge fan of Janet Jackson's music. Love her music. I mean, her Rhythm Nation album was fantastic. I mean, it spawned, a plethora of top 10 hits. It was groundbreaking as far as music style is concerned. And she went on to have other hits. That's just not her only hit album. There were others, and she continued to make music for in 2 decades. And her silence in the music industry has been felt. She's right now. She's 48. If you can believe that, Janet Jackson. Yeah, the little girl on Good Times. Remember Penny? In Good Times, back in the early 70s. She's now 48. And she's married to some Middle Eastern businessman. I guess he's a billionaire. And we haven't seen much of her, but she was out and about, I guess, yesterday in Italy, going to a high-class, high-ticket party for, I don't know who, I don't really care. But look, celebrities can be like Janet Jackson and just be quiet, be themselves. And well, I don't know why she married this Middle Eastern guy. The picture that I saw of her and her husband, first of all, her husband is not, this is coming from another guy. He's definitely not a looker. I have no idea what Janet Jackson saw in him. It definitely couldn't have been because of the money, because she was worth a lot, not $1 billion, but she was worth a lot without him. So not to mention, she could have kept making music and producing and getting into other entertainment projects and making a buku bunch of dollars too on her own. She didn't need his money. She wasn't one of those celebrities that was nearly broke. Janet was very well set, still is very well set. But I miss her music, but I'm not going to take her political views as gospel. And neither should anybody take my political views as being gospel either. I'm just another voice. But there is no need to elevate a lot of these so-called celebrities. I mean, a lot of these celebrities, they're superstars, quote unquote, in their own minds. They really are. I mean, they really do not have a hell of a lot of talent, and they just happen to be at the right place at the right time, or been in the right movie at the right time, or they sang the right song at the right time. And book authors, look, we don't have a lot of anywhere on the planet. Actually, we don't have a lot of people that can sell the number of books as say a Stephen King can. I mean, one of the dirty secrets about becoming another number one best-selling author is you don't got to sell an awful lot of books to do that. You really don't. It's the rare case when you have an author who sells 1 million copies of his book. It's not normal. I mean, there are thousands upon thousands of books printed every year. Most of them, the book industry tells us, barely break even. They barely break even. So in other words, an author who, a lot of times, if they get a decent size advance, they usually do not make too much more than the advance because they don't sell enough books to go beyond that advance. So, so we're talking a number one bestseller could be as few as 10,000 copies sold. Well, if you understand printing, a run of 10,000 copies is not exactly cheap or inexpensive to do. So it's not a lot to sell, but it fills the bookstores. Just walk into a bookstore. I'm not talking about walking in a library, because the library is a repository of books that are even out of print. But walk into a bookstore. Almost all the books in the bookstore, like a Barnes and Noble, they're currently in print. Or maybe they recently went out of print, but they're current as far as they're currently in print. There's a lot. I mean, there are thousands of titles in a bookstore. Now, imagine that only about 1% of those authors are actually making any money. And that 1% are the authors that are actually making the publisher's money. All the rest, the 99% in there, not so much. Not so much. But they're there basically to draw people into stores. So there's a plethora of choice. So again, should we be listening to authors who sell 10,000 books, 10,000 copies of their book? Should we be listening to novelists who don't write anything about reality? Should we now believe that the author of the Twilight series has some special knowledge about politics that we should definitely pay attention to? How about what is it, J.K. or R.K., whatever her name is, Rawlings of Harry Potter? Should we be paying attention to her political views because she wrote the Harry Potter series? I don't hear Stephen King running around talking about and interjecting himself into politics. And that guy is a multi-millionaire author. A number of I think Stephen King has had more of his books turned into movies than any other author in history. But yeah, he's not running around out there talking about politics. And I'm sure many people would listen to him, but would they? I mean, the guy's a horror novel king. Yeah, he writes other genres too, but he's a horror novel king. But nobody's going to put him on a pedestal and say, "Hey, Steve, why don't you come tell us how things should be in politics?" Nobody's. Why do we go to Gwyneth Paltrow and say, "Hey, Gwen, what you thinking, girl? What you thinking of politics?" I think I'm going to try to live on $29 a week, the equivalent of food stamps. Really? And some of these, wonderful celebrities that run around talking about global warming, yet they're in an industry that is not about recycling and being efficient with our resources. Let's face it, you're blowing up things for no reason other than for entertainment. Really, think about it. So we're supposed to listen to you on political stuff and climate stuff, when you guys are the biggest waster of the Earth's resources there are. But look, again, I like movies. I love movies. I love, certain TV shows. That's all good. That's all well and good. I'm not dissing anyone about that. But when you come to me because of your celebrity and you start telling me that I need to do this or cut back on this or be more efficient with this, I look at you and say, what are you? You're a freaking hypocrite. How can I possibly pay attention to you? But the reason they're able to get away with it is because nobody actually stops and thinks about it. Look, they're blowing up stuff. They're wrecking cars in Fast and Furious, wrecking tons of cars, good operating cars. For what? For no other reason than to entertain you and me in a movie theater. So you're telling me that entertainment is a better use of our resources over industry. Look, I'm not dissing the movie industry because, again, I go to movies. I like movies. But if you're going to be one of those movie stars that comes out at me and tries to talk politics and thinks that, your word is bigger and better than somebody else's, I just have to say, stop and check yourself. Look at what you do for a living. All you do is make believe. You pretend for a living. And you waste a lot for a living. You really do. No, plain and simple. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah. So yeah, we lost. We've lost Benny King, and Janet Jackson makes a rare appearance, but I don't think she's coming back anytime soon to make any more music. Unfortunately, for those of you who are Janet Jackson fans, of which I am one, but I'm not gonna follow. Look, these kids who's the big group that One Direction. I always I call them No Direction, but One Direction. I mean, they're 20-somethings, early 20s. It would be, I don't know, to me, it would, if they started talking politics, it would be like Justin Bieber getting into U.S. politics. Forget the fact that, he's a Canadian. That's irrelevant from my point of view. But come on. Are we going to really listen to Justin Bieber because, he's had a bunch of string of hits, musical hits? I don't think so. Why? Because the kid's an idiot. At least he's acted like one up until this point. And he doesn't really contribute anything of significance. He entertains us. Yes, entertainment is very important for humankind. We need some lightheartedness. We need to be entertained a little bit. We need to be able to let off steam. But at the end of the day, that's all it does for us, is relieve some sort of stress on a temporary basis. It just entertains us. That goes for sports stars too. I don't know. I don't fully understand why some people, they uplift some of these sports heroes as demigods. I just don't fully understand that. They're another human being that's had the chance and opportunity to practice an awful lot at a particular sport that they happen to be very good at. That's a lot of, it's like an Olympian. They just practice. And most of us do not have the opportunity to be able to practice at something like that because, we have to go out and make a living. So we don't have sponsors behind us that'll say, okay, we'll pay your living expenses for the next umpteen years. Most of us do not have that opportunity. But just because we do not get that opportunity does not mean that they have some sort of special insight that we need to elevate. Actually, it's usually quite the contrary. They usually don't have very much of anything at all to contribute outside of their little sphere of operation and influence in the particular sport that they're in. If Tom Brady wants to talk about football, I will listen. I will say, because Tom Brady, probably, arguably one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, he knows football. If he wants to talk about football, yes, he's got something to say. He's got something relevant to say. But if he all of a sudden decides, well, I'm just going to go out and give speeches about politics, I'm going to have, what? Really? No. Just because you're a football player doesn't make you a politician. Any more than being an actor. Because, hey, just because you played the president in a movie or two doesn't make you presidential material. Any more than playing God makes you God. You don't have any special insight on God just because you played God. I don't know where people come up with this stuff half the time, but folks, it is what it is. We have a problem, and it's not just the United States. It's a lot of Western and westernized society that has this issue or this problem of deifying celebrities. We ought not to do that. And we've deified them so much that now we're starting to turn some of our politicians into celebrities. And just looking at the facade of these people, not looking at what's in their soul, we're not giving any depth to them. We're not looking at any depth to them. We just look at these people and say, oh yeah, man, they're a star. Really? No. We don't need a star to be president. We need somebody with presidential